We are live.
All right, here we go. It is 3 p.m. Eastern on Thursday, February 24th. Welcome, everyone, to the final episode of this season's Getting to Know Dynatrace. We wrapped up a season. All right, so that's great. Listen, folks, I really appreciate you taking out the time today to come listen to a little bit more about Dynatrace, getting to know a little bit more about Dynatrace. We're looking forward to doing additional seasons in the future. Today, our guest sales engineer is Joe Nguyen. He is works on my team. We'll introduce Joe in a moment and let him walk you through a live demonstration of Dynatrace. But before we do that, as with all of the other episodes of Getting to Know Dynatrace in this season, we have a couple of segments. So let's go to the first segment today, which is, as we all know, the What's New segment. So what's new? Well, if you know Dynatrace and you've been following us, you know that the past couple of weeks was a really exciting time because we just wrapped up Perform 2022. And the Perform conference this year, it absolutely delivered. It was just a fabulous session. We had, hot days, those hands-on training sessions, which were honestly, we sold them out. As a matter of fact, not only did we sell them out, there was so much demand that we've actually set up, and again, go to dynatrace.com for this, but we have actually set up some of the most popular sessions for the hands-on training. We're going to offer those again in a couple of weeks' time. So you can actually, if you missed it, if you weren't able to sign up for those really popular hands-on training sessions, you can actually sign up, and we're going to be running them again for those people that weren't able to actually get fitted, on for the when we ran it last week. In addition to that, obviously there was just a ton of really interesting announcements and just great content. Pardon me, that sorry, folks, that came that was released during Perform 2022. So let's start with the what's new at Dynatrace. Obviously, the topic was everything that happened at Perform. We had great speakers. We had Simone Biles. Just a fabulous session. Me personally, the session that just actually brought it home for me was Andy Grabner and Kelsey Hightower, the principal engineer from Google and one of the key people behind Kubernetes. That session was just absolutely tremendous. As a matter of fact, what I'm going to do right now is let me just sort of flip over to the blog site. And if you go to the Dynatrace blog site, our What's New section, you're going to see, details of all of the stuff that potentially, you may have missed last week during Perform 2022. As I mentioned, this session right here, this one was worth the price of admission. I could not imagine a more articulate and elegant conversation than what Andy and Kelsey were able to do here. And, things that that he discussed was just the art and the science of simplicity. Ultimately, how does Kubernetes work? And that Kubernetes is obviously it's a place to start, but it's not an end game. It was just such a refreshing conversation. As a matter of fact, you went down here, and the one that part of the conversation that really carried it home for me and was like just really super impactful was this part of the conversation where Kelsey described, what's at stake. It's the real people behind the dots on the dashboard. He just described a scenario in such an elegant fashion that was just so powerful. It really explains why we do what we do. And so I highly recommend this. If you get an opportunity to watch this session, please go ahead and do that. In addition, there was so much other exciting things that we talked about at Perform 2022. We had so many customers come and speak and talk about their journey with Dynatrace. We announced so many exciting things. Like, for example, we announced that, our Dynatrace Appsec, we covered that like several weeks ago on one of our Getting to Know Dynatrace sessions. We talked about the Dynatrace Appsec capabilities. Well, we announced that future version of this is going to automatically not only detect a vulnerability and an attack, but be able to block it in real time. This is, clearly super exciting. We're really, really happy about this announcement, and definitely give the blog a read. Look into this. There's just, a tremendous amount of content. Not only did we have all the content from Perform 2022 last week, but as always, we're always announcing new exciting things and keeping you up to date on our blog and our news sites about all of the different things that are happening here at Dynatrace. For example, now what we're doing is we've improved the way that Dynatrace actually monitors itself so that you can better manage deployments of Dynatrace or manage deployment at scale. So why is this important? Why would I care about this? Well, if you're an organization that is deploying tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Dynatrace agents, clearly scalability is of a concern. And so we've even improved our ability to allow you to self-monitor Dynatrace so that you can understand exactly the health of the cluster that all of the data is being stored on. In addition to that, there's other things that happen over the past couple of weeks. Obviously, as everyone knows, we're constantly rolling out new capabilities to the platform. We do this on a monthly basis for our managed or our on-premise releases. We do it every 2 weeks for our SaaS version. So yeah, there's new release notes because obviously there's been new versions of Dynatrace that have been pushed out. So go ahead, come to the blog site and have a look at that. Okay, so there we are with the What's New segment. Lots of exciting things, obviously going to the news /blog site on our website. This is where you're going to find more details on everything that we're talking about. So many exciting things happening here at Dynatrace. That gets us to our next segment. So this is our next segment. This is the Did You Know segment. So for the Did You Know segment, this session, did you know that Dynatrace can be used to automatically manage your application releases through SLOs? These SLOs, service level objectives. Dynatrace last year, we released this new capability that is part of our cloud automation offering. The release monitoring allows you to insert some very simple metadata into your builds that allows Dynatrace to let you better manage those builds so that you can better automate those builds based upon SLOs that you get to define. Here's the way that it works. You are building your applications and you're moving them through your CI/CD pipeline. And so what Dynatrace allows you to do is it allows you to manage your release inventory so that you can add metadata to these releases so that we can track the health of these releases. Then what we can do is we can allow you to basically choose specific metrics that are important to you. You choose the metrics that are important to you that define a good release as opposed to a bad release. Then you can define an SLO, a service level objective around that metric. Then with those SLOs, you can define what your error budget is. And so that allows you to understand that, hey, is this build falling within that error budget or is it falling outside of that error budget? If it falls outside, then stop that build from going live, because you don't want to release something that has, like a lot of performance bottlenecks or a lot of errors or a lot of exceptions. And those SLOs are an easy way for you to be able to select the metrics that are important to you that define what does a good build look like, and then let Dynatrace automate that entire process so problems are not being released into production. Really exciting stuff that we released last year. And it's one of these things that, if you're not familiar with Dynatrace, did you know that we could do that? Well, now you do. And with that, folks, we get over to the really exciting part of today's session. This is demo time. So we got our guest sales engineer, Joe. Joe, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thank you, Jonesy, for letting me join you today in this amazing series. I'm Joe Nguyen. I'm a solutions engineer at Dynatrace, live from Toronto, Canada. So shout out to my Canadian viewers today. I've been in the APM space for around 6 years now. And before I get into the demo, I'd like to start with a statement. Observability is at scale is easy if you have the right platform that was built for it. So those of you who are current users of Dynatrace know that intrinsically, that Dynatrace was built with automation and AI in mind for dynamic cloud environments. So let's jump into the demo and show you what Dynatrace is all about. So
Looking
the
good so
example,
far, Joe. Yep, we can see it. Looks
yeah,
great, man.
okay, awesome. So an example I like to throw out there is that we have stories where organizations are able to deploy Dynatrace to collect telemetry data to over tens of thousands of hosts within a 24-hour period. How does one achieve this? What technologies enable this? It all starts with the automatic data collection. And one of the vital and core features of the Dynatrace platform starts with the one agent. So once deployed, Dynatrace will automatically collect information, metrics around logs, traces, and metrics. But it goes beyond just the three pillars of observability. It has the ability to collect and understand user behavior or digital experience management. It's able to collect and ingest data from cloud providers. And there's over 1,500 technologies that Dynatrace supports. Like this dashboard here, for example. We have data from our logs, from our app services and services, cloud providers.
Joe,
And
Joe,
yeah,
I'm going to take a moment there and just pause you for a
yeah,
second. You know, you're the first one that we've had, first sales engineer that we've had on the getting to know session. You actually created a dashboard specifically for getting to know Dynatrace. I think that's awesome. And folks, what it shows, one thing that it shows really well is just how easy it is to create a context sensitive dashboard. Creating dashboards in Dynatrace is super easy, and Joe just sort of nailed it with this dashboard here that he's thrown together, you know, specifically for today's session, and you know, showing things like new capabilities in our dashboards, being able to actually show the events and logs. That's relatively new capability. A couple of these like colored boxes here, you know, showing you know, in this particular case, indicators when we're falling out of, you know, thresholds that we want to be aware of. You know, super cool. Great job, Joe. Keep going.
right. And to add to that context, let's check out what Dynatrace builds automatically. And what we build automatically is this dependency mapping called Smartscape. It's a fundamental, unique feature and is leveraged by our AI engine. So for example, if a metric around performance or availability misbehaves, Davis can leverage the Smartscape and understand the root cause and customer impact of problems. So instead of your teams and resources spending time configuring or altering thresholds, Dynatrace automatically baselines your performance and availability metrics. So when you have an issue that deviates from normal performance and availability, Dynatrace will generate problems, which are alerts based on anomalies discovered within your dynamic cloud environments. So what does that look like? And now I'm going to show what looking at problems is, I guess, yeah, looks like within Dynatrace. So there's a few ways to navigate to problems, and maybe I'll go in a few ways for that. You can expand the menu on the left-hand side and navigate to problems, or any of the tiles on the dashboards are interactive. So by clicking into problems, it'll bring us to a list of the problems that Dynatrace is detecting within the current selected time frame, so the last 24 hours. I have a filtered view in another tab just to be ready for this. And let's dig into one of the problems now. Let's dig into this one. So clicking into problem, we see that Dynatrace understands the what, where, when, and how this impacts with context in mind. So going through this problem card as a summary, Dynatrace detected a degradation in user actions performance. This has affected one front-end application, 4 backend services that support your front-end applications, and 1 infrastructure that your services run and depend on. It's also able to correlate the business impact of this problem. So Davis is observing over or around 2,000 users being affected and over 180,000 affected service calls. Below that, we see more details and telemetry data around the impacted application. So here we see the current response time, around 700 milliseconds, exceeds the auto-detected baseline of 280 seconds, right? So talking about how Dynatrace baselines those metrics, it's able to understand what normal, typical performance looks like and addresses that with what the current response time is. So this year we see that the current set of user actions is slower by 172%. This has affected over 43 different user actions across 3 user actions, affecting all browsers, across all geolocations, on all operating systems. Now, this value will change, right? So geolocation is set to all, but in circumstances where, let's say, your content delivery network is down in a particular region, or for a set of regions, it's able to determine that and let us know which regions are affected.
Hey, Joe, just hold on a second there. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
CDN. What's a CDN?
Yeah, so it's a content delivery network for, let's say, certain resources or even, certain routing of loading data.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So what Joe's talking about with the CDN is it's a way that organizations can push content closer to where the end user is. And they have this concept of what they call POPs, or points of presence, remote points of presence. And a problem with the CDN can affect a very specific geography. So if you've got an oversubscribed point of presence or a point of presence where traffic is being misrouted, that's the type of thing that can affect, from a geographic perspective, the performance that end users could see. So you could have users in New York getting very different performance than, say, somebody in Chicago because of an issue with the CDN. Joe, great job pointing out that specific example as to why it's important for us to actually show the geolocation. CDN, that's an exact real world type scenario where it can go wrong and cause headaches that's really difficult for an organization to understand when that problem's occurring. Great job. Keep going, man.
Yeah, so next I'd like to talk about root cause, but before that, I'd like to point out the Davis AI engine itself. So here we see that Davis is analyzing across over 11,000 different monitored entities. So that takes us back to the Smartscape. All of those points within that map, those are the dependencies that the AI engine is analyzing in terms of the full stack dependency of hosts, processes, and services, and also understanding the connectivity. So the upstream and downstream calls of those services, of those hosts, of those processes. And because of that, it's able to understand where within your complex environment that problems are I guess, coming from, right? The root cause of those issues. And within this problem card, the root cause are these set of events here. So the root cause for this, for example, is this check destination service. The AI engine is also correlating all of the events as well. So we're able to pull in, let's say, an event regarding deployment, right? So with this ServiceNow integration, it's able to understand which and link out to the configuration item that is related to this deployment, the remediation step that it took within Ansible to remediate the issue. And we're able to even put in the project's information and all of the metadata related to the owners so that we can reach out, for example, and let them know of the current events that is currently unfolding. It also ties another little bit of events here, for example, CPU saturation on a particular host, but it's also let us know and the ability for us to drill down into where slowness is experienced, right? So which part of the code is being slow and where to address the current issues of our problem. Before I dig deeper into that, I'd like to point our attention as well to the visual resolution path, which is a visual way to understand how the problem evolved over time. It leverages the Smartscape, and it is a cut and slice of that visualization into a more easy to understand with components that are directly related to the issues. So let's play that back and see how the problem unfolds. So here we begin to see certain components beginning to highlight and how it is affected across the current ecosystem or infrastructure of your applications. I'd like to stop here and talk about all of the ongoing events and all of the events that Dynatrace is correlating together. Typically with other tools or with other platforms, all of these separate events are basically alarms ringing off in your systems. It could be alarms from your front-end monitoring tools, your log analytics tool, or your APM tools. What Dynatrace is able to do from a AI and understanding the connectivity and dependency is able to correlate all of this into one problem card itself. So instead of getting alerts from all of the various tools and trying to do the manual work of correlating it together, Dynatrace is doing this all for us, right? It's able to correlate this into one problem card so that we're not sifting through a bunch of logs or traces. It's able to tell us where the problem is and how it develops over time.
So, hey, Joe, just let's take a pause for a second because we've got questions that are coming in. And, this example here that you gave is perfect. Like this is, one of the ways of looking at it. One of our colleagues describes this as an automatic virtual whiteboard that gets generated so that, typically in a war room scenario, when you're trying to figure out what the root cause of the problem is, everyone's in the same room, they get on the whiteboard and they start drawing connections to things. Dynatrace does that for you. And to Joe's point, here, what's happening is, you've got a problem that is happening in 6 different components. So you could have 6 different monitoring solutions, all generating alerts. And there's 19 different events that are coming out of those 6 different components. So in this case, you would get like this alert storm. And what Joe's illustrating is with Dynatrace, the AI is smart enough to know that, hey, all of these other alerts, they're all part of the same problem. And that's really critical when it comes to identifying, what the issue is. Now Joe, just for a moment, let's go to some of these questions here. So first question that I see here actually came in from Sonia, and she's asking a little bit more about the remediation steps. So let's go back one screen and let's talk about this right here. So you can see that Dynatrace is actually connected, in this case, to ServiceNow. We have a bi-directional relationship with ServiceNow, where not only can Dynatrace feed that topological information that Joe showed us with the Smartscape into ServiceNow, but we can also take information out of ServiceNow, and our AI becomes aware of those events so that when it is doing its analysis, it can say, hey, here's a problem with this service, but in this case, it was associated with this deployment event. Now, Dynatrace can also be used to trigger automation routines or remediation routines as well. And you could do this either through ServiceNow automation. You could do this through our integration with things like Ansible, so that if Dynatrace detects a condition, have it run this Ansible script, have it run this ServiceNow remediation routine. The idea is that with Dynatrace, it's giving you the answers in terms of, hey, here's a problem, here's the specifics of the problem, and then it's allowing you to actually, connect to those tools that are actually going to run the remediation. So at this point, Dynatrace doesn't do the remediation ourselves. We actually connect to your ITSM and ITOM tools that would actually do the remediation for you. So hopefully that clears it up a little bit, Sonia. But how do you know when to run a remediation routine? What's the right scenario, the right set of conditions to run that remediation routine? What Dynatrace is doing is providing the answers to automate, those ServiceNow routines, those Ansible routines to run at the appropriate times under the appropriate conditions. Now, the second question that we had here came in from Twitch. And shout out to all the folks watching us on Twitch. Absolutely. That's awesome. The question is, can we bring, this is a great question. How about this one, Joe? Can we bring in custom topology and events from third-party tools like Splunk, Elk, etc., and utilize the Dynatrace AI Ops capability for event correlation? So one of the things, if I was talking to some of the guys, they would do correlation. Nobody wants to do correlation. We want to do causation. So the way that you get to causation as opposed to correlation, remember correlation, and it's just so as everyone's clear, correlation is I've got a bunch of time series and I'm looking at the time series, and if I see a similar type of event occurring at a similar time, obviously they must be related. Now, I can go on at length about this, but what I will do is I'll point you to a quick little Google search. Search up spurless correlations. If you search up spurless correlations, just go ahead and have a look at some of the different type of correlations you can do by trying to match time series together. The problem is that correlation is not causation. Not necessarily. You are inferring that there is a relationship between those two events. With Dynatrace, we actually look at things from a causation standpoint because we use a deterministic AI. The deterministic AI has a model, a view of the world. Part of that view of the world is illustrated within our topology. So in this case, for that question, came from, I don't know, did we get the name of the person who gave that from John? From Twitch? I don't know who the name, I don't know what the name is, but I see the question. That question, you asked it a really, really smart question in a really smart way, because you asked if we can bring in custom topology. And the answer to your question is, yeah, you can. You can actually modify it's a room. Okay. No, it's okay. I'm just going to take a pass on that. Question was great question. And the answer is, yeah, you can modify the topology. So inside of Dynatrace, we have an API that allows you to modify the topology. So imagine this scenario. Scenario is that I'm working in a bank branch and I've got a branch server that's connected to a printer, right? And I've got a whole bunch of teller machines that are out in that branch. What I want is a topology to allow me to see the relationship between those teller machines, the branch server, and the printer. The printer is not something where we deploy an agent, but we can become aware of it as an entity and include it as part of our topology using that smartscape. Once it's part of the topology, when there is an issue, and if we're importing those metrics from Splunk or Elk, it doesn't matter where those metrics come from. You could be using PowerShell scripts to pull it off of the WMI. And so long as Dynatrace can get that metric, and we've now established an entity associated with that metric, and that entity now established the relationship from a topological standpoint, our AI can start, in that particular case, understanding if there is any specific causation associated with a problem happening on that new entity that we've ingested into Dynatrace? Just a fabulous question. That is a great question. Thank you so much for that. Okay, Joe, let's get back to the demo. Let's get back in there. Those are great questions. Keep the questions coming, folks, because that's what makes these sessions so interesting. Okay, so Joe, the last thing that we were on was the problem playback.
Right.
Let's go and take it from there. Joe, did you have somewhere you wanted to go?
Yeah, so let's dig deeper into the technicals of, what is this problem card telling us, right? So we know that it had affected a service, right? But let's take a look at where time is being consumed, right? Where is the slowness occurring within our systems? So by clicking into analyze response time degradation, and it's only a few clicks away, we're able to understand that right away.
So Joe, I'm going to stop you there for a second because this gets right back to the question we just talked about.
Right,
this
great.
is 100%, you're bang on. This is a great example of how Dynatrace as a causation engine is so different than a correlation approach. In this case, Dynatrace knows the entity that's causing the issue. And since we know that entity, and because we have all of that observability insight in terms of the traces and the spans, we're able to let that AI engine analyze it and get us here. Keep going, Joe.
Right. So it gets us here where it's telling us, all right, with normal performance, it typically, right, is maybe around a certain amount of milliseconds. But in this particular example, we see that in terms of code execution time, there is a increase of a few hundred milliseconds for the set of requests, right, to our check destination service. We can even go into another layer deeper and see, what methods are being executed within, let's say, that JVM, for example, and where the slowness is happening with code context. So by selecting our hotspots, right, we're able to see where that slowness is coming from, right? So here it looks like the slowness is coming from this particular library, right? And this is a demo application that we've built in-house to kind of show off some of the features. But right now it's just sort of looping on its own to generate that slowness that we have. So right away, we're able to understand the packages, the code execution, the methods, all within a few clicks within Dynatrace.
And all Joe had to do to get this to work was he ran a simple installer on his servers for his application. There was no configuration that was required. He just ran the installer, and then Dynatrace connected the dots, started baselining everything. And when there was an issue, it determined what the root cause was and allows you to go all the way down to the methods that were causing this performance issue. Okay, Joe, keep going, man.
Yeah, so we've looked at going deeper into the tech stack, into the code level view, but let's take a step back and see how users are impacted. How do we understand that there are around 2,000 users that were affected by this problem, right? So let's take a look at this at our digital experience management capabilities. So let's take a look at what our users are doing within our applications when this problem occurred. So here we are clicking deeper into our digital experience management, and these are the set of users that is associated to the problem. So this is a list of users that were affected over time, and below is that particular list. So by clicking into, let's say, one of our users, for example, we're able to see high level the profile that we've built around this particular users in terms of how they experience our set of applications on average, what is their most common or most browsed browser, what are the common devices, as well as some details around their activity. Below that is the list of sessions. And here we're able to even see how users interacted with our front-end application. So with this session level view, we see metadata around the related session, including how long this session lasted for, what is the user experience score, the browsers, for example, their IP, operating systems, and screen resolutions. We're able to see a timeline of events that has occurred in terms of what pages they've landed on, what sort of activity they've interacted within the application, from clicks, navigation, or even detecting rage clicks. If a particular functionality isn't working, we're able to track that and label such an action as rage clicks, right, as a metric in order to understand if a user is having difficulties with, let's say, a button or even a process within your web application. All right. So one feature I do want to highlight is the session replay feature, but this particular session doesn't have that. Let me go poke around our demo environment here for one that has it enabled. And I'm thinking it's coming from this set of application.
Actually, you know what, Joe?
Yeah.
Let me help you out here. Just
All
go
right.
into the left nav and let's go down and look at the application view. Just because we're talking about them. So let's go in and yep, we're looking at the front end. So here, as an example, Dynatrace is monitoring, a single instance of Dynatrace is monitoring 26 different applications. We've got customers that are monitoring hundreds of applications with Dynatrace. Now, Joe, instead of looking at the time frame in the context of the problem window, let's just look at it over the last 2 hours as an example, right? And let's go look at, say, the just the regular type in Angular, not the GCP Angular, but just the regular Angular.
What?
Yep. There you go. Let's go in and look at that one. So now what Joe's doing is he's showing us a view of the overall application. So this is showing us what's the average load time that we're seeing. What's the average XHR time that we're seeing? If we scroll down through this, we could filter on browser type, geolocation, where the users are coming from, our top user actions. We can filter on the top errors if need be. You can even do something like, for example, you could follow the entire service flow of this app if need be. But what Joe's going to do now is he's going to click on Analyze User Sessions. And now we get that list of users that we were looking at before. But Joe's going to do something different. He's going to go in and search for a specific user. And this is showing how Dynatrace could be used in customer support or help desk type scenarios. You're going to look for Hainer as an example. So just type in HAI. There you go, Hainer Hastings. So here's a user, Hainer. He's coming to us from Bavaria, Munich, Germany. All right. And now what we get to see here is a list of all of his sessions like we did before. But Joe, go in and actually show us now how that session replay actually looks.
Yeah, so in addition to some of the details that we saw before, with this particular session, we've enabled session replay. So before we were looking at the timeline of events and actions that took place, but what we can do with session replay is play that back as if that user was interacting live with us. So by clicking on this play button, we get a video representation of how the user interacted with our front-end applications. Give me a moment. Looks like the session data is loading up.
It takes a moment. It does take a moment for it to load up here. And while it's loading up, one of the things that Joe had shown at the top of the session, just sort of scroll up a bit, Joe. See those purple boxes there? This is actually a perfect illustration about how Dynatrace actually integrates with your analytics tools and then enriches your analytics understanding of how your users are in fact using your applications. This information is coming to us from Google Analytics, it's coming to us from Adobe Analytics. Some of this information is coming to us by doing some introspection on the back-end requests. So I'm actually looking at, when a service is making a call to, say, a database, maybe there's a piece of business information that I want to pull out related to, I don't know, the amount of revenue associated with that particular transaction. These can get attached as session variables. And then these session variables, these session properties are things that we can aggregate on. So if we wanted to use Dynatrace to get a better understanding as to how our campaigns compare to each other, that's the type of thing that you can do with this. And so now let's see if the session replay has had an opportunity to load.
Now let's take a look. It looks like
let's just give the page a, give the page a refresh.
Yeah, let's do that.
That's the great thing about doing live demos. There we go. And here it is starting to load. Now you notice that at the very beginning, it actually had this little red bar that's telling us that it was actually slow to start loading. That's giving us an indication as to where there was an issue. But now you can see here the actual session replaying. Go ahead, Joe, keep going.
Yeah, so we're able to see the session replay. And what's great about session replay is we're also able to scrub the data. So if there's any sensitive data there, right, we can scrub that. For example, this payment here for, let's say, booking flights, we're able to scrub that out. We're able to even pull out, let's say, the revenue cause of this journey, right, as a user session data, right, that accompanies this, so that we can, determine what is the cost of, let's say, a certain problem or the performance problem of this session. So this, yeah.
No, great job, Joe. Great. Like, it just, that is such a super powerful way. And here's the use case that it solves. So in most organizations, there are internal applications that employees use every day. Now, you might have employees that are non-technical people. They're not technologists. They're just business people that are doing their day-to-day business job. And when there's a problem with the application, what happens is they create a ticket with the help desk, but then they start a process that's very anecdotal and back and forth, where the help desk says, what's the problem? And the person who's having the problem has to say, well, it's not working. The help desk person goes, oh, that's very helpful and detailed. Thank you very much. Clearly I'm being facetious here, but the fact of the matter is that you get this anecdotal back and forth between the employee having a problem and the help desk. Dynatrace, with this capability, cuts through all of that like a laser. So now the help desk can just look up that user session. They can see exactly what that user was seeing during that session. They know exactly then where the problems are. And Joe, scroll down and look into one of those user actions, like say the initial one where we've got tolerable, Apdex rating. If we go into the waterfall for that, here is how that page loaded in that end user's browser. So now we know how it's behaving, how it's loading in their browser. And here, what we can do is if we hover over, say, the special offer, the yellow bar, right there.
Let's see. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. If we hover over the special offer instead of the enabled, just one down, just go down one more.
Oh,
no, there we go. Yeah. What do we see? We get to see a pure path. And Joe, you're going to explain to us what a pure path is, because it is 100% Dynatrace jargon. You're muted, Joe.
Oh, hi. Sorry.
There you're back. You're back.
There we go. Yeah. So pure path is how we do transaction, or how we do distributed transaction tracing. So with our one agents deployed across, let's say, our environment, we're able to string together all of the trace data of your individual services, your database calls, or your, I guess, yeah, your middle tier service calls as well, and able to see, what that performance looks like from code call to code call. So here we're drilling down from a user, a set of actions that they've performed, all the way down back to the code view of what this trace looks like.
Absolutely. So, Joe, let's take a pause for a moment because, again, we've got more questions. And so great questions coming into us from Twitch again. Question is, when we say AI ops in Dynatrace, is it specific to causation relation it maps within the models or for the identified entities? And so if I understand the question correctly, yeah, it is very much about the instrumented entities. So for example, Joe, in this case, hit the ellipsis there on the right-hand side and do a service flow. So what we're doing is, for that specific transaction, we're actually looking at the logical service flow. And if we scroll to the right-hand side now, you can see that we're going through all of these different services. Every one of these services here is instrumented with Dynatrace. However, you could get to a point where there's a service that Dynatrace is aware of, but it's not instrumented. And so in that case, our ability to get down to, say, that method level visibility, we're not going to have that. But we do know that the outbound call is taking a long time for us to get a response. So the causation capability is very much based upon what is instrumented. That's why the more agents that you place out there, the more intelligent Dynatrace is, and the better it's able to actually to do that causation. In very cases, Dynatrace can be aware of something where there is a problem where it's not instrumented, but we just know that, hey, there's a slowdown or an error coming from that, from that outside source. We can't tell you what it is because our agent doesn't live there. Next question is, what's the default retention period for session replay? Session replay, I believe it's 7 to 10 days is typically the average sort of session retention period for that. If you need longer time, if you're a managed customer, like if you're running Dynatrace in an on-premise fashion as opposed to a SaaS fashion, you can play with that. You can actually adjust your storage numbers and increase that. But for our SaaS customers, typically 7 to 10 days is what we keep sessions for. Okay, Joe. Oh, wait. Yep. No, I think those cover the questions. Keep going, Joe.
Yeah, just to add a little bit as well, right? Having our agents deployed throughout the environment adds a lot of context and enable analysis across different services, right? The real value of distributed traces or peer paths in that is analyzing traces, delivering a holistic understanding of what is happening across, let's say, your application, right? In terms of microservices, right? It's able to leverage that to understand, microservices and cloud complexity in an easy to visualize and easy to follow manner.
You're bang on there, Joe. And this service flow map is just such an interesting example because we're actually tracing across multiple technologies, right? We're going from Apache to Nginx to Node.js back to Nginx. Eventually down there, you're hitting some PHP that's going to MySQL. Then we're hitting some Apache, then we're back to some Tomcat, and then we're hitting this Oracle database that happens to be an RDS service that's hosted up in the cloud. And you know what, folks? No one had to go in and do any sort of manual instrumentation for this. Nobody had to go modify a config.properties file. Nobody had to go in and modify their code. Dynatrace just generates this for you automatically. All you have to do is install the agent. Keep going, Joe.
Yeah, and on top of that, right, we have our AI engine that is analyzing these set of traces for us, right? We don't have to even spend time on one particular trace or take a look at multiple traces. Right? We're leveraging the problem cards, the AI engine to do that work for us, right? It's detecting all of the common patterns that we would typically do by hand.
In this case, even knowing this service flow map that we were looking at was, we were filtering it on one pure path. If we wanted to look at 100 or 1,000 pure paths, we can do that as well. We can absolutely do that as well. So we've got about 10 minutes. Let's see. What else do we want to show, Joe? What do you think?
Let's see. Let's talk about some of our new features then. Let's talk about security vulnerabilities. I remember seeing the blog post actually recently about DevSecOps. So let's take a look into that particular feature.
So you know what? I generally avoid conversations when it comes to things like, you know, politics and stuff like that. All right, I loathe doing it, but the unfortunate events that have been happening globally today, okay, and I'm talking about the events over in the Ukraine. I've been listening for you know, some of the commentary that people have been talking about, and one of the issues is you know, that's coming up again and again and again, is potential retaliation based upon you know, cyber actions. And so, you know, clearly being able to understand where your vulnerabilities is, this is a really, really interesting topic because of what's happening today. Those risk actors are out there. And if you don't have visibility in terms of where your vulnerabilities are in production, that can be a significant issue. So, Joe, go ahead and tell us a little bit more about what we can do with our AppSec offering.
Yeah, so Dynatrace is able to not only detect vulnerabilities within your live production environments, but it's able to prioritize that by adjusting or giving a Davis security score for those set of vulnerabilities, right? And it does it across several dimensions, depending whether this code is or your piece of functionality is exposed to sensitive data, is exposed to public access, or contains, let's say, uh, yeah, sensitive data, for example. So digging into, you know, one of these vulnerabilities, it's able to tell us whether an exploit is publicly available, how many process groups it has affected, as well as, right, those sensitive data assets or public exposure. Because we have that dependency mapping and connectivity from upstream, downstream, right? We're able to build that out and let us know and adjust the, let's say, CVSS score to let us know if we should prioritize this particular problem or not.
Okay, Joe, this is hold on a second. We're going to take a pause here because there's more questions coming in. And now I'm looking at, oh, we won't have enough time because these are good questions. Let me take this first question and we'll get back to Sonia's question. Joseus on LinkedIn asked, how do you compare heap memory on two different time frames? Honestly, I would say what I would do if I was doing that, right now, right off the bat, you can go into a couple of different views inside of Dynatrace where, like, if you're using, like, say, the services view, or if you're going in and looking at some of the processes, you know, there's all sorts of different ways that you can chart things out. But if I wanted to look at heap memory across two different time frames, I'd probably go to a dashboard, right? What I would do is I would go into a dashboard. I would create, you know, two different charts. So I would have one chart for the heap memory for time frame 1, and then I would have right next to it another chart that would have the heap memory for time frame 2, and I'd lay them out side by side or on top of, like, one over top of the other. That's how I would do it. You know, just a very, sort of quick way of doing that. But, when you're trying to do those comparisons and you want to do different time frames, that's one of the things that if you're in a Dynatrace dashboard, every individual tile in that dashboard, you can define the time frames. And so a real effective type of dashboard that you can have is, here's the metric I'm looking at. Here's the performance of it right now for the last 2 hours. Here's the performance of it, say, over the last 24 hours, the last 72 hours, the last 7 days, the last month. And then that sort of gives you a really nice sort of, and right now, this is how you can do it globally, but you can do this individually at the individual tile level as well. So you can create all sorts of different time-based visualizations. So great question. Thank you very much for that. Getting back to Sonia's question, which is, hey, real quick, Joe, head us down over on the left nav to Kubernetes view.
Right, let's do that.
Obviously, everyone's talking about Kubernetes. And so if we go into, say, the demo there, just go up one more. Yep, right in there. Right off the bat, Dynatrace out of the box is going to provide these views that's going to show us our cluster utilization, our cluster workloads. As we scroll down into this, we're going to be able to see things in terms of, how are our pods being used? What, how many of them are set, how many of them are deployment pods? How many of them are static? How many of them are daemon set? Down below, keep going. Look, it's even got now the vulnerabilities for our Kubernetes deployment here. I hadn't seen that before. That's a great thing about Dynatrace. Every 2 weeks, there's new functionality, new capability coming out, and I'm always being surprised with new stuff that even I haven't seen. So this is super cool right here, that now we're looking at the vulnerabilities associated with this Kubernetes deployment. On the left-hand side are all of those K8 types of events. So, your scheduled events, your created events, your unhealthy events. So if you go in and filter on these, you get all sorts of details associated with these. And actually, can we open one of those up?
Yeah, go ahead and open. Take a look. Yeah, we'll just open one up. Yeah, there we go.
Look at this. So this again is just super cool and so useful information, where not only do we actually have this Kubernetes, we have this event. We know, in this case, what entity it's associated with. But now what Dynatrace is doing is it's decorating this event with all sorts of information that's coming from the Dynatrace entity model about this particular entity, as well as the information that's coming from the Kubernetes and the K8's metadata itself. So if I need to get, and this is the challenge with Kubernetes. Kubernetes, as Kelsey Hightower talked about during the Perform session, this stuff, there is a significant amount of complexity that comes with it. So does it offer significant business value? 100% yes. Does it increase the complexity of your deployments and applications? 100% yes. And so this is just sort of illustrating how Dynatrace automatically ties together all of the different moving parts inside of your Kubernetes deployments, how it decorates metadata on top of this so it connects them. So I know that that event is associated with a specific entity that is got this K8 metadata associated with it. This type of information is absolutely key for you to drive automation through your K8s. Great question. And Joe, great find with this, functionality. I hadn't seen that before. Super, super cool. Hold on a second here. Last question. It's got to be the last question because we're at the top of the hour. We have so much fun with this stuff. Last question is there a predictive based metric chart available on the dashboard? How will my response time be based on that? So, okay, great question. At the moment, that's not a chartable capability. At the moment, you'll notice I'm using my language very specifically. At the moment, it is something that we do have on our roadmap. You're very likely going to see that capability moving forward. However, I'll take it however pause. The however pause is that there is a little known API that actually you could query. So you can query this API on a Dynatrace time series to allow it to analyze the time series and then give you predictive values as to where it's going to be. So you can effectively use that API to create a custom metric inside of Dynatrace to throw it up onto a dashboard. But as I said, in the future, it'll be one of those features that eventually you'll start to see, and it'll be one of those things that it'll just all of a sudden pop up, and it'll just be available, just like all of the other sort of new stuff that we've seen here this week as well. So, folks, listen, it's 4:00. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending this, the last episode of this season's Getting to Know Dynatrace. Joe, just fabulous job, man. Really appreciate the effort. Loved what you did with the custom dashboard. Just great job, man. And folks, thank you so much for those questions. We'll be announcing a new season of Getting to Know Dynatrace in the future. We'll be bumping things up and jazzing things up and being able to do some more flashy video stuff. But we're still going to have the same type of content where you can ask us questions. We'll do the demonstration, and we'll be starting the new season up this spring. But folks, it's been a fabulous season. I've really enjoyed all of your questions. With that, folks, I bid you adieu. Have a good day, and look forward to seeing you next season.